focused on ending corporate harms to nature. And we are one of the co-hosts for this event, along with RAID, Natural Resource Justice Network, Lee Day, thank you for the lovely facility, and also Climate Works. So welcome, we're so excited to have you here today. I'm very honored to be able to moderate this conversation because it is incredibly interesting. Before we kick off, and I really wanted to, welcome all of our speakers. First, we have 6 speakers, so we are going to have a lot of rich conversation. And our first 3 have really come from far away to join us. So thank you so much for spending time and effort to come with us. Of course, it's London Climate Action Week, and we know that we have to urgently come off of fossil fuels. We need to end our reliance on oil, gas, coal. We need to transition, but this transition needs to be a clean and a just transition. We know that the critical transition minerals are at the heart of a global race at the moment. We know, I think everyone in this room is familiar with the fact that they power electric vehicles, renewable energy systems, and increasingly military supply chains and the rapid growth of AI data centers. So as it's indisputable that we have to transition off of fossil fuels for planetary health reasons, we cannot let this rush to secure transition minerals come at too high of a price, which is essentially hurts people and destroys our environment. And the high price that we are going to talk about today, which can't be ignored, is the toxic pollution that harms communities and ecosystems. So as we transition to a better world, we should seek to not replicate the destructive practices similar to those long associated with oil extraction, for example, but really forge an accountable pathway forward. So in this conversation, we are basically going to talk about sort of efforts that are currently happening in Africa, really focused on documenting through science, really documenting the impacts of water, air pollution. And really, we want to get an understanding of what's going on at the ground level, but also really with the view of scaling, looking at how we can scale, replicate, and really support these efforts to achieve the systemic change that we need to see. So I first am going to introduce these 3 wonderful speakers next to me. First, Eric Nag. Eric Nag is he's a campaigner and a consultant, also with AfriWatch, which is a very well-known and very reputable Congolese and also now more so broadly focused on African NGO, and also a grantee of ours, which we're proud to say. Eric is an environmental governance specialist with over 15 years of experience working on natural resource governance and policy engagement. He's worked and consulted for well-known organizations such as Global Witness, Natural Resource Governance Institute, and a number of civil society organizations across Africa. And he's currently on the steering committee of the African Coalition on Green Minerals. So thank you, Eric, for joining us.
Thank you, Sima.
Next, I'd like to introduce Ada Chimya. Ada is the executive director of the Zambia Alliance of Women, which is a women-led membership organization with grassroots structures in 6 provinces in Zambia. ZAW's mission is to empower women to take charge of their lives through gender equity and equality, social justice, and environmental sustainability, so that the rights to a healthy life is enjoyed by present and future generations. Ada is an economist, project management specialist, and eco-feminist, passionate about women's rights and the ecosystem in its entirety. So thank you, Ada, for joining us. And we have Joelle. Joelle is the Executive Secretary of Resource Justice Network, Madagascar. Joelle is an anti-corruption and natural resource governance expert. She's currently serving as the Executive Secretary of Resource Justice Network, Madagascar, which is formerly Publish What You Pay. She's a secretary of the African Coalition on Green Minerals, and she has a wide expertise, not just in Madagascar, but more broadly in Africa, focusing at the intersection of anti-corruption, energy transition, and extractive industries governance. So thank you very much for joining us. I want to kick off this session by really talking about these, as I said, like on the ground, like what's happening. And it's really through, we're going to have 3 case studies really presented to us. Eric, I want to start with you. So you've done a lot of work around copper and cobalt. And cobalt, of course, is a key component of lithium-ion batteries. Can you speak to the impacts, what you've seen, documented, and been told by communities living in and around the cobalt copper mining areas in the DRC?
Thank you very much. Excuse me. Thank you very much, Sima. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here to share this experience from the DRC. Is my mic working? Oh, sorry. Thank you. So you would agree with me that communities are the first scientists to understand what's the impact of mining extraction that's happening around them. They are the ones that bear the brunt of the impacts of mining, and so they would, over the start of the mining cycle, be experiencing this. And so as a free watch, what we value the lived experiences of communities, and what we've done is engage with over 290 communities, residents in over 35 communities, to understand how they live the experiences on the impacts of mining on them on a daily basis. And the testimonies we've gathered is that communities repeatedly say their water sources have been contaminated, there's been air pollution, their livelihoods are deteriorating, there is significant impacts on their health. Now, in regards to access to clean water, they've testified that the water sources, both ground and surface water sources, which they relied on for drinking, for household utilities, has increasingly been polluted, and they associate the rampant skin rashes, rampant itches they experience on a daily basis to the water which they are using. And this is linked to what the companies are doing, not only with respect to the impacts of water on them. There's whole issue of women reporting that because of the water they are using, there is significant gynecological issues which they are experiencing. There are also problems with reproductive health which they are experiencing, and there's been a significant number of miscarriages which the women are experiencing, and menstrual disorders, and the parents are raising lots of concern about the health of their children as a result of the quality of water which they are using. Not only water-associated issues with the health impacts of the communities we've engaged in, they've also testified that their livelihoods have been impacted as a result of the quality of water they are using. They're reporting and testifying that crop yields are failing, the amount of fish catch are failing, and this has a negative ripple effect on their livelihoods. For example, if they testify that once fish catches is dropping, crop yields are dropping, the amount of income they are able to generate from the sale of this produce is falling, and that directly impacts on their ability to get resources and income to be able to meet their basic necessities, including access to health and education for their children. Recently, there's been a report, they've testified that there's been a significant amount of dust pollution which they've observed accumulating on schools, on their farms, in their houses, and that points to the fact that the mining operations around their context is directly contributing to this. And so we value in these lived experiences of communities how they are observing this and how they are testifying that, and we think it's a valuable contribution to understanding what the impacts of mining around these communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric. I mean, it's obviously extremely worrying and concerning, the impacts that you have been told, and that Afterwatch, and also Ray, who will come later to speak to, as well as Fabiano. A question I have is, this isn't new. The pollution that has been happening in and around these mining areas has been going back quite a long time. There is a mining code in the DRC. Can you speak a little bit to what does the mining code require mining companies to do specifically in terms of ensuring there isn't this harm coming from their operations, and what is the gap?
Thank you very much. Just to take a look back again, we've beyond the lived experiences of communities, we've as a Freewatch, we've engaged with other partners, universities, research think tanks like RAID, Source International, to complement what communities are experiencing with scientific studies that reveals that what communities were testifying as impacts of what is happening on them as a result of mining was true. The results reveal elevated levels of particulate matter beyond the WHO recommended standards. And of course, companies are not responding to such elevated concerns. And so that goes contrary to the mining code, as you mentioned, which has clear provisions for what companies or investors should do. For example, they need to engage in developing environmental and social impact assessments and make that publicly available and disclose that so communities, NGOs, government entities can have access to those documents and understand that. The mining code also makes it clear that if there are incidents of contravening the provisions on the code, companies are required to remediate, to reparate, and to ensure that they reinstate the quality of the environment, the respect of human rights around mining concessions. But whilst the laws are very strong, the implementation and the monitoring of those laws are weak. So that's the experience in the DRC. And so as a Freewatch, having done the documentation, both lived experiences and engaging with partners like RAID and Source International to get evidence that is reliable, we've been able to engage with these investors to push for the respect of provisions of the mining code, to push for remedial actions around where communities have mentioned that there's an issues around water pollution, issues around the deterioration of their livelihood activities, including agriculture and fish catch. So, of course, as I mentioned, the legal framework is there, is strong, but there is a problem with the implementation and the monitoring, and that's a significant gap which we seek to address as a Freewatch and our partners based on the evidence which we are gathering both lived experiences and evidence that is scientifically generated that complements each other to show exactly what's the impact of mining on the communities and how that contravenes what the legal provision says and how that helps us engage in processes of policy-based advocacy to address these issues that are cropping up as a result of the mining operations in the DRC.
Been done scientifically in the DRC shortly. I want to now turn to you, Joel, to really hear more about the work that you have been involved with in Madagascar. Madagascar is becoming an important exporter of graphite, a key component of in rechargeable lithium-ion batteries and electric vehicles. Joel, many in this room know of the company Rio Tinto, but far fewer will know of its subsidiary QMM, which operates a mine in the Anosi region of southern Madagascar. Can you paint us a picture of what's happening there? What are communities living near the mine experiencing? How are communities and civil society mobilizing to hold the company accountable?
Thank you, Sima. Hi, everyone. I would like to not go deeper on graphite in my presentation, but I would like to talk particularly today with the case of QMM, Rio Tinto. Many people in this room may know the parent company Rio Tinto, but the QMM, the subsidiary, which stands for Quick Madagascar Minerals, is the one who is operating in the south of Madagascar, one of the poorest regions from a very known as well as poorest countries. The mine extracts ilmenites from mineral sands along the southeastern coast of Madagascar, and the phosphons are naturally radioactive, and they contain zircon and monazite. So monazite is the byproduct which is exported by QMM, and it is used particularly to produce the magnets inside the electric vehicles and the wind turbines as well. So it is also a transition mineral cases that I'm going to share with you. What is really happening in the ground is that there was a lot of researches and a lot of documentation that has been done, including civil society organization who has conducted and highlighted that there is pollution, water pollution, soil pollution, and air pollution across these mining areas. But the impacts are rated as moderated to worrying at all. So if you are asking to me how is the communities experiencing this so far, it's just in one word, contaminated water. Because the communities are really depending on the lakes who is surrounding the mine. They are using it for drinks, for food, for their daily life. So they really depend on these lakes. What was happening is that there was a mass day of fish, collapsing fishery, and the repeated discharge from the mine wastewater into the rivers. And this really document and highlight that those problems are from the exploitation of the mine itself so far. And there is a two-tier reality, because Rio Tinto's own staff housing is served by dedicated treated water system, and the communities who is next, the door gets murky water. So here we are talking about accountability. So I think everything about it really gives us a mapping of the accountability gap that we are discussing. But what is encouraging in the situation is that there is a lot of initiatives and local initiatives that are emerging, and they are really pushing for the authorities to act from this situation. So this is something that gives us hope, and also this has pushed the government to act last year in July 2025.
Thank you so much, Joël. You just mentioned sort of this excellent work that's been done, the community has done to mobilize and to have testing done by the government of the water, and that the water analysis that the government was pushed to do confirmed that the water was unsafe to drink. And I understand that the community has also made a number of additional demands relating to the boreholes, independent monitoring, relating to a local laboratory, a commission being established of community members. And I understand that QMM has also signaled that they are going to shut down their operations from 2027. Have any of these demands, these community demands succeeded? Can you speak to where lawyers, scientists, and international allies, where they could add the most value to turn these commitments into real change before the company exits?
Yeah, that is exactly right, because neither the company or the state has done completely an analysis of the water, but because of this work of the civil society, they act for it last year in July 2025, and the result has just confirmed what the company was saying about that the water is not safe to drink, and it is acidic, and also it has no residual chlorine to protect against contamination. So, but what is one tricky part of this is that the test was not complete, because they left out one analysis, which is the microbiology. So it is hard to justify that the water is dangerous, and it can impact the public health actually. So that's why communities have ranked 5 top-tier demands regarding this, the result of this water analysis last year. The first one is the boreholes and safe drinking water. The second is the independent water monitoring system. The third, reforestation of the watersheds of mining that the mining has affected. The fourth, a local water analysis laboratory, which is not far from the reality. And the fifth and the last one is an independent water and environment commission, which will be a kind of groupment of a local committee who will build up to make the implementation of this independent water and environmental commission. Yeah, so if you are asking me how this succeeds yet, no, honestly, because this remains as a demand, not something that has been delivered so far. So the clock is ticking, but as QMM, Rio Tinto has announced this, in the information publicly that they may sell QMM, so they are kind of having a closing the closing phase actually. So that's why I think in this map of what is happening, the room can help in this session as well, as we have a scientist, a lawyer, and also international organization in keeping the momentum and also to turn the evidence into action actually, of what is really happening there.
To talk about what that help can look like. Ada, I'd like to come to you to talk about Zambia, and I understand there's a video. We will see if we can come back to the video, Ada. But because you are here and you're such an expert, we'll come back to that. But it's the tailings. I'm going to ask you about the tailings dams disasters in Zambia, which have been widely reported internationally. In February 2025, tailings dam failure at the Sino Metals copper operation on the copper belt sent millions of liters of acidic waste into the Kafue river system, a river that millions of Zambians depend on for drinking water, fishing, and farming. Can you take us back to those first days and weeks? What did communities along the river experience, and what has happened since, including in the legal action?
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. First of all, the tailings dam by Sino Metals collapsed on the 18th of February, on the 18th of February 2025. And the scale in terms of the toxic acidic metals that were discharged were, I think, We know that it's over like 1 million tons in terms of what went into it. Specifically, I'm going to speak as a person that's coming from the grassroots. When it happened, I was actually in the same community that is Chambishi. We have projects and we work in the area. So we have members in Wazanga community and as well as Kalusale, that is very close. All those were affected, and what happened is most of them, their livelihood depends on agriculture. Like they have gardens, they were doing fishing, and when this happened, there was like everything just changed. The color of the crops changed in terms of like it just became yellow. Some was like were getting into deep like black and all, and I think there was just great loss. It was scary because of the water contamination. Everyone uses the water, like including ourselves. Like the Kafue River reaches, I think it just like it goes throughout, like in the country. I think it 70%, 70 to 80% of the people depend on the Kafue River, you know, for water, for different things. So it just like the change. If you see the video, I think it will really like speak about it. But it was terrible because then it was a sudden cut of livelihood for the community members, sudden cut from the water that they depend on for cooking, for bathing, for everything, especially I think for their livelihood. The gardening I think was a big thing for most of the people in that community. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
It's February the 18th. An environmental disaster on an historic scale has begun. At a copper mine in Zambia, owned by the Chinese company Sino Metals, a dam holding back a reservoir of toxic waste has collapsed. What some experts claim is one of the worst and least reported mining accidents ever has been unleashed. Matched, they say, by one of the worst government and industry cover-ups. It is spewing lethal chemical poison, arsenic, cyanide, uranium, lead, mercury and more. Soon, slicks of dead fish line the river shore. Nearly 2/3 of Zambia's 20 million people live along the vast Kafue river system.
It is an environmental disaster, really of catastrophic consequence when we consider the fact that Sino Metals has polluted a river on which millions of people depend for their livelihoods. We're also talking about wildlife. If we look at the communities in the immediate vicinity of the river, the entire livelihoods have been destroyed.
A helicopter drops lime into the river to try and neutralise the acidity from the spill. The dam waste was so acidic it could dissolve human bones. And after the dead fish, the dead and dying crops. Week after week of damaging delay went by. From the air, the scale of the damage is clear, the scarred, polluted landscape of the now empty reservoir. The government did order Sino Metals to pay for an independent survey to assess the damage. And that survey appears to have been buried by the government and the mine, but Channel 4 News has obtained a copy exclusively. Tonight, we can reveal this 385-page report compiled by South African environmental assessors who sampled hundreds of sites in the vast toxic slurry. The river supplies drinking water to about 5 million people, including the capital, Lusaka. So, weeks of painstaking research, thousands of samples taken, and you'd think, wouldn't you, that the emergence of this report would trigger, even at this late stage, the kind of large-scale cleanup that was required. In fact, nothing like that happened at all. The environmental assessors say it would need at least 100 trucks a day for over a year to begin clearing away the contamination. Watching all this, the environmental assessors appear to have lost patience. In early June, they wrote this letter to the government begging them to take action. The language they use could hardly be more stark. Their letter says that official reports stating that 50,000 tonnes were released is grossly inaccurate, and that their estimate is 30 times that, over 1.5 million tonnes. That's not all. They write that extremely hazardous substances were released, including arsenic, cyanide, uranium, and other heavy metals, which has created a toxic environment capable of causing irreversible harm to both the ecosystem and human health. Communities are at serious risk of developing birth defects, cancers, liver and lung disease, heart conditions, and other chronic illnesses. Without immediate intervention, the consequences for future generations of Zambians will be severe and long-lasting.
Thank you. Pretty horrific. Ada, can you, you mentioned that you were there, for parts, and I'm wondering, can you speak to the impact on women, I think specifically?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, I think most of the women depend on agriculture, and they were doing like their livelihood depended on gardening. So they had their gardens really getting the water from depending on the Mombashi river system and this, I think this damage really it puts their livelihood to a standstill. It was really bad because you are at a stage where you don't know where to get the water from, because from the it's water that can kill you, like just by even the smell, by you getting close to it. I think it was really bad. So it's for us, I think I must say that this tailings dam collapse was not the first one. We have seen a number of them, but it's just that the scale hasn't been so big. So from time to time, we noticed there would be a collapse, but it's not going to be big, and it gets covered up. And I think what we noted as one of the biggest weakness is on our regulatory institutions, because from the perspective of the community, they'll tell you that from time to time they'll see the Zama, like Zambia Institute for Environmental Management, like officers, and those from the water, from the water regulation, go to the mines. So the mines involved here, we're not just talking about Sinometals. There's also Ramsey mine within the area, and they also it's close to the people, and it also encounters some of the collapses. And when they go to check, it's not clear whether it hasn't been clear whether those tailings dam are really monitored to see if they are resilient, they're strong, they are going to, it's because it happens, I think from time to time. This was just a big one and everybody knew about it, but we have heard those cases where this happens and it gets covered up, and we think that there's a lot that our regulatory institutions could do, and we're not sure even now when they say, oh, we've sorted it out, it's been repaired, and we are making sure that it won't happen again. We really don't trust it, because we don't think that we think that this is something that has long-term effect. It's going to come out like the lead poisoning in Kafue that happened many years ago, and then now you see people being born with deformations and so on. So we clearly see that I think this is going to have harmful and long-term effects, and we're not sure. Like when we go to the community, even now, you can still, I think the air, you can still smell it. We had all the crops like destroyed and everything, and even when they said, oh, now you can come and still do the gardening, you still don't trust if the crops that are going to be grown in that area will still be good. The fish, you saw the fish getting destroyed. So I think there's more harm, not just to the fish, to the crops and to wildlife, but I think also there's great harm also to human beings. Yeah.
Thank you, Ada, for sharing. It's important that everyone in this room understands the degree of the contamination that happened, because we also need to really talk about the accountability and what we can do next. I'm going to thank you to our three first speakers. I want to invite Annika, Flaviano, and Matt to come forward, please. Pretty difficult first panel, I'm going to say, because those three case studies, the purpose here is we want to talk about opportunity, we want to talk about ways of closing the accountability gap, we want to talk about the role of law in basically doing that. But there are very difficult realities and very difficult contexts here. I know that we are running a bit short on time, so I'm going to do a very quick introduction for my next panel. So of course we have Annika. Annika is the Executive Director of RAID, Rights and Accountability and Development. Annika joined RAID in 2017. Previously she was the Deputy Africa Director at Human Rights Watch, where for 14 years she led in-depth fact-finding on human rights violations in sub-Saharan Africa, especially in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Africa's Great Lakes region. She's testified in war crimes tribunals before the UN Security Council and in front of many governments. So we have a true advocate and research expert. Thank you, Annika, for joining and for co-hosting. We have Flaviano. Flaviano is a scientist and the CEO of Source International. Flaviano is an environmentalist and human rights activist. He founded and directs Source International. With over 20 years of experience, he's worked on more than 50 cases across all continents. Source International is an NGO that provides scientific and technical support to communities affected by extractive industries and environmental crimes, helping them gather evidence to pursue justice, compensation, and policy change. It's great. Thank you, Flaviano, for coming and joining us. And we have Matt Renshaw, who's a partner here at LEAD. Matt specializes in seeking to hold companies to account for human rights violations and environmental harms abroad, being outside the UK. His practice focuses on complex international group litigation, including landmark claims arising from Shell's operations in the Niger Delta, on behalf of the Bodo, Ogali, and Bile communities, which helped establish important precedents on parent company liability and access to justice in English courts. So thank you so much, Matt, for being part of the panel and for, of course, also leading the facility. So I'm going to start, Flaviano. I'm going to start with you as the scientist. We are going to go. You've recently done, along with RAID and with AfroWatch, some very in-depth scientific work to look at documenting scientifically the impacts, of the water and air pollution. Can you share with us the work that you've done? And I want to say the communities, as Eric pointed out, have long been talking about the harms they are facing, and in many ways your work has confirmed what the communities were already saying. Please, we'd like to hear about your work.
I speak here, or should I take this?
Yes.
Take this. Okay. Hi everyone. Thank you very much, and thank you for hosting me here. Yeah. So that's exactly what Source International does. What we do is when the community already know that there is a pollution, there is an issue, but they need the evidence to prove it. And so what we found in the case in Kolwezi in Congo, and we focus mostly now speaking mostly on the air pollution, and the air pollution is normally measured with two main parameters, which are the PM 2.5 and the PM 10, which is something that I guess most of us are familiar. And I want to just give you now an idea of how bad it is, the situation there. The most polluted part of London has concentration, like close to the highways, we have concentration of PM 2.5 between 15 and 18. Those are the maximum that we reach in the most polluted part in London. In Kolwezi, we never recorded anything below the double of that. The graph that you see behind me is the AK1 point. It's a school. It's called Galaxy School. It's a school where kids, 1,700 kids goes every day, and the concentration of PM 2.5 is actually 44. So it's like 3 times more the most polluted part in London. And we know that this pollution, even at the level of London, is extremely dangerous. We know that in London every year, 5% of the people who die in London died because of PM 2.5 and PM 10 pollution at concentration that are 15 to 18. In this school, there are kids with concentration up to 44 constantly, and even more on PM 10. Now, kids spend their lives in school, of course, 5 to 10 years, 15, depends how long. After 5 years in school with concentration at that level, in the lungs of a 5-year-old kid, there will be 1.8 grams of particulate accumulate in the lungs, okay? And this is something because the lungs are not made for being self-cleaned. It's not like something you drink that you pee out. If you drink something polluted, it doesn't stay in your body forever because mostly your body is made to filter it. The lungs accumulate. Everybody who smokes we know through smoke that even if you stop smoking, the damage to your lung will remain, and it takes 15 to 20 years to resolve that problem. So, as I say, after 5 years of school, the kids will have 1.8 grams of particulate inside their lungs. How much is this? I've done some practical science. This is 1.8 grams.
Convenient.
In a 5-year-old kid, you'll find this after 5 years. If they go after 10 years, which is normally what you spend in school, at least, that school is like 11 years long, the process in that school, is that. Now stop wasting coffee. And this is what it stays in the lungs of a 10-year kid in Kolwezi who go to school every day. And so this is just to say how bad it is, the situation of air pollution in Congo. And then I didn't mention, but Eric mentioned before, also the water. And this is not simply coffee, it's not normal dust, this is a mineralized dust. We discovered that this dust is cobalt and copper and zinc and other elements in concentration that are above what is allowed in Europe in working space. So basically what am I saying? That is 1,600 kids, and remember, it's the AK1. AK3 is a house, it's even higher. It's not the highest point, but I'm talking about this because it's a school and it's very relevant. This reflects in dying. Lung cancer, asthma, all sorts of complications that led to these kids developing problem in their lungs that will stay forever, and at the end, dying, simply. I mean, I'm being brutal, but that's the reality.
Flaviano, can I, yeah, it's very difficult to hear that. And it's, as you pointed out, it's a school, right, with young children. And if that was happening here in London, people are, I mean, it has happened here in London, and people are outraged. And we actually do see system change, even here, which is challenging. I wanted to ask you, because you have appeared as an expert witness in court cases, can you speak to like how this type of data that you have shared with us, so your findings, how are they interpreted and received by the court?
Normally receive the data depending on the strength and the scientific strength and basis and liabilities of the data. And that's why it is important to have a solid and robust scientific methodology. And that's why now I'm a bit self-advocating, but I'm advocating to the scientists to do this type of job. We've seen in the past some people trying to do similar thing, but it's different because it's not solid enough, let's say. If you have a solid basis, solid methodology, then it's accepted in court, because the good and the bad thing of science is that it's codified. You know, the science is science. When you have this methodology and these results, that's the results. There's no way you can challenge it. Maybe that's normally the reaction from companies, and is to just blame someone else for the fault. You know, they cannot say that this is not, that the pollution doesn't exist. They normally try to say, well, this pollution is not caused by us. It's the previous owner, or is because people burn rubbish. But you know, because we know that. We also did, if you read the study, we did the investigation on the composition of the PM to just take out the other possibility. So I can tell you for sure, with certainty, that these data are caused by the mine, because the composition of those particulates are mining related. They are not combustion related. So there's cobalt, there's copper, there's zinc, that is what is inside the mine. If they would be from burning plastic, you would find other type of components that we didn't find in it. So that's, again, it is well taken from court, but it needs to be scientifically robust.
So RAID has, and you and RAID, and you've been working a long time documenting the human impacts that have been connected to cobalt and copper mining in that belt for a long time, from whether it's large scale mining, you know. I wanted to ask you, you know, it's been a long time that you've been doing this work, and I know that you have, with Afterwatch, you really kind of changed the strategy, I want to say, because, you know, we were documenting the labor and the abuses and to the workers and the children and the women, and then you started to really look at ways to document the water pollution, like using a scientific approach, and then also now the air pollution. Can you speak to why you started to look at, you know, this type of tactic? You know, is it, I know it's to complement the other work, but so what drove you? And I know it's around filling this corporate accountability gap, but I'd like to hear more.
Thank you, Seema, and hello, everyone. I mean, the main reason we started doing this is because I suppose we noticed two things. One, we began the panel today with community information and community stories and what I would call community evidence. But it's so often ignored. And even though we might have been collecting anecdotal information, perhaps conducting surveys, how many women are experiencing miscarriage? How many women talk about birth defects and the like? There's a point at which we needed more science, and we noticed that gathering community testimony was important, but wasn't hitting all the buttons. And so that's where we began to work with Flaviano and also two really well-known Congolese scientists who frankly had been documenting some of this environmental pollution on both people and biodiversity for years in the DRC. And just to again ensure everyone is aware, right, the mines are mushrooming in Congo. The desire for copper and cobalt is skyrocketing because of the green energy transition. A few years ago, I probably only would have mentioned cobalt, which is needed in the batteries of electric vehicles. Today, I would mention copper just as much, and this is, by the way, both DRC and Zambia, because it's the same copper-cobalt belt, but copper is needed for AI data centers, as Seema pointed out initially. And those are also mushrooming. So we're seeing this on a phenomenal scale. Kolwezi is the largest town in the center of the copper-cobalt belt, but there are hundreds of smaller towns and villages impacted. So the anecdotal information wasn't enough, and our reports were read, maybe, hopefully, beyond the executive summary, but I felt weren't quite hitting the mark. And I think science does. And I would say that there's a need for two different kinds of science. And very little of it is happening in the global south in the green energy transition space. And the two types of science, I think, are one, citizen science, which we do in London. Loads of people have air monitors in their back gardens that monitor particle matter 2.5 or particle matter 10. Lots of schools in London have it. This school in Kolwezi didn't. But citizen science helps. And the second, I think, is professional, independent science, which is beyond dispute, right? Which is just the science. Okay, Donald Trump might question it, but hopefully sane people won't. So I really feel it's absolutely crucial to us making the point, let's not repeat the ills of the fossil fuel economy. Let's have the data early on. I want to add one other bit. The other reason we wanted to start to gather the kind of science is we know the companies have it. And the large multinational mining companies in Congo's copper-cobalt belt are absolutely gathering this data on both water, on air, in part because they have to do so for health and safety reasons for their own staff, but also, as Eric mentioned this morning, Congo's mining code and many mining codes where the World Bank helped to develop them in Africa are strong on paper in terms of the law. We can question how they all came about. That's a different debate, but in terms of what they're like on paper, the law is strong. And so often these companies are required to provide environmental reports, and they're all required to do environmental and social impact assessments. Do communities have access to that? No. Do they share that? No. Are they gathering the data? Absolutely, because we see buckets in local communities which gather the dust. Often people don't know what they're gathering. They may even be slightly fearful of the science, but the companies are gathering it. And we wrote to multiple big companies saying, what have you gathered? Share your particle matter 2.5, particle matter 10 data, share your data on the water. And they either won't share it or they share it in such a disaggregated form that it is, they can say a kind of line like, over 12-month period, there were no significant spikes of particle matter 2.5. I don't want to know what it's like in the rainy season. It's also bad in the rainy season, as we know. We want to know what it's like in the dry season. Give us the actual weeks, the months, the 24-hour basis. And that data is not being shared. So that's what pushed us to say, let's gather our own.
Annika, I wanted to ask you about, well, what do the companies say? Because I know you do a lot of advocacy with companies, not just the mining companies, but you know the EV, the BMWs of the world. What do they say?
Depends on the company. So if I'm talking to large multinational companies, and some are more open to discuss than others, on the whole, it's a more antagonistic discussion, I would say. I think most of us in this room probably know extractive industry does not have the best reputation, and so they're used to being hammered. And I'm probably not their favorite person in a meeting. But I do think the opportunity here for influence is, first of all of us. I do think consumers have the opportunity to create influence, but it is those household names. It's your Volkswagens, your BMWs, your Teslas, you know, the kind of car companies buying a lot of this, or the tech companies building the AI data centers. And there we're getting a much more receptive audience. And I think, I mean, my sense is there is a view that we don't want to do what we did in the fossil fuel economy. I think there is a view that it can be done differently and some desire to do it differently. And I think there's a real need to take that desire and turn that into action. And I do think, you know, for campaigners in the room, campaigning on this matters. But I sense there is opportunity here. And I also sense opportunity with investors who are keen to invest in the right kind of a transition. Not easy, and I know there's lots of pessimism. We can maybe get into that in the Q&A, but I think there's opportunity here from that direction.
So patient. I wanted to really ask you about the litigation that you have been involved with targeting Shell around oil and really science. Can you tell us, I mean, I like how Annika has just highlighted the fact that we don't want to repeat the same problems associated with oil exploration, particularly, which continues to be devastating. So what are the lessons from the Shell cases that you'd like to share relating to the use of science in your work and how it's been received by the courts?
Thanks, Seema, and thanks everyone for coming on such a warm day as well, and particularly with the storm last night, which kept me awake for 2 or 3 hours. So very grateful for the support and for everyone for coming along. I'm going to focus on litigation brought in the UK courts against Shell for pollution in Nigeria, and particularly the Bodo litigation, which is brought on behalf of the Bodo community in relation to 2 massive oil spills in 2008. When they happened, Shell said that these were small spills that had caused a minimal impact and been cleaned up at the time in 2009. And what we needed to debunk that was robust scientific evidence. And I'm just going to touch on 3 aspects of that we gathered in that litigation that may be of relevance to other people and other claims. The first crucial thing was having baseline data in that case. So the community said that the environment before the pollution from Shell was pristine. It was, you know, you could hold out a bucket and you would catch fish. It was in good condition. Shell, when they saw the legal claim, tried to suggest that actually the environment was already polluted and there were already problems before these massive oil spills. In Bodo, we were incredibly fortunate that one of the members of the community was a very significant, well-respected local scientist. And he had done extensive studies of the Bodo Creek and the aquatic life there that had been properly peer-reviewed and published. So because of that baseline data, we were able to show what the environment was like before and how it was Shell's pollution that had caused the change that was seen after the oil spills. And obviously you're not going to have that in every case, but I'd say where there is a risk of pollution from the sort of tailings dams, you know, the sort of mines we see, there is real value, if possible, in collecting some baseline data before that polluting event happens. The second expert evidence, scientific evidence point is satellite evidence that was crucial in Bodo. Again, Shell's narrative was the oil's only reached about 20 hectares of mangroves and hasn't caused very much damage. What we were able to see from satellites was the gradual vegetation change over time and the destruction of about 1,000 hectares of mangroves, which was the largest destruction of mangroves from oil pollution in history. But that satellite imagery was crucial, again, in debunking what Shell was saying. And then thirdly is scientific testing. So gathering samples, we gathered water samples and soil samples. There was a trial last year in Bodo about whether Shell had cleaned up the pollution properly and what more they should do now if they hadn't. And we felt that Shell's data on the levels of contamination in the area was unreliable. And so we had to go, guided by experts, of course, and do our own testing there, which showed extraordinarily high levels of pollution. And again, that evidence, to put that before the court, to demonstrate that actually things haven't been cleaned up properly and a lot more needs to be done was absolutely crucial. So just there are a few examples of the sort of scientific evidence you may need in a court case or to try and influence a company to do the right thing and clean up their contamination.
Comes back. I really one more question, Matt. I know we're a bit short on time. How can the scientific information, like how can we use this to call for cleanup and other forms of remedy, such as health monitoring affected communities who are living in toxic conditions? And maybe in your response, if you don't also, I understand that you also raised a constitutional rights argument, around the right to a clean and healthy environment and whether or not you see that can be a role.
Thanks, Ian. So the first question I'll try and deal with quite quickly because I know we are short on time, which is really that scientific evidence, I'd say, is absolutely the cornerstone of any environmental claim, and without it, the claim will not succeed. So it's absolutely crucial. Is my short answer to that. In terms of constitutional claims, in our recent Shell Nigeria litigation, we tried to introduce claims under the Nigerian Constitution and the African Charter, partly for example, the right to a clean environment. And these claims were against Shell, so against a private company, constitutional claims against them, which has numerous advantages. The one that perhaps is most interesting, though, was we tried to bring a claim for the right to life. And we said that environmental harm, like the oil pollution in the Niger Delta, engages the right to life that's protected by the Nigerian Constitution. Shell responded and said, no, this has nothing to do with the right to life. You can't prove that anyone's been killed because of this pollution, so this has nothing to do with the right to life. And what the judge found in our case was that actually the right to life does fall within the scope of the Constitution, of environmental claims, and can be engaged in those circumstances. And that sort of jurisprudence is also an emerging trend across other jurisdictions as well. So the African Court has recently found that the right to life is engaged in circumstances of pollution, as is the Inter-American Court. So in our case, the judge didn't let it through because she said the right is not engaged against a private company like Shell, so it doesn't have horizontal effect. But more broadly, I think that opens the door potentially to, in the sorts of cases we've heard about today, the right to life being engaged in various constitutions. So that's something to look out for and hopefully can be progressed further in future litigation.
I'd like to invite Ada, Joel, and Eric to come join us. So we heard a lot about it's the scientific work that was done in the Copper Belt area of the Congo, and we heard Annika talking about I guess a bit of her discussion with companies. What about investors and strategy? Does anything resonate with you that could be helpful for the situations that you've been involved with? And maybe just 1 minute, please.
Okay. Yes, I think, thank you so much. The research, the testing and all. I'm just thinking that I think a number of times when we speak about pollution, like in Zambia, when the results of the tests come out, it clearly shows that there's no pollution, even at the point where you've clearly seen the pollution. So independently done, I think that would really be great for most of our cases in Zambia. Thank you.
Sounds like an invitation, Flaviano.
Yeah, thanks, Sima. A lot has been said. 3 things that resonates and stands from my side is the first about community should understand and appropriate what is the result of those water testing So I think put science in communities' hands, what Annikin has said about science and citizens. The second point is that to connect evidence to legal and policy pathways, because science itself is not enough. And the third and last one, particularly for the case of QMM, it's not something that happened yesterday. It was a long year of process. So supporting the local communities through the process and through the mining operation would be really helpful.
Thank you, Joël. Eric, in a minute, what does success look like?
Thank you. It's about moving this evidence to actually result in concrete outputs and outcomes that changes the situation of communities. So there's a lot that has been done in the DRC. The data is there that actually it's robust because it combines lived experiences and scientific evidence from our partners. It's time to move that so there can be better advocacy that results in the change of communities' life that addresses the corporate impunity which we've all mentioned. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Matt, what, with this litigation, oil and gas, or oil and shell, what do you think about these mining companies and what's needed to get some cleanup from them?
Goodness me, we're still recording. In terms of Shell in the Niger Delta, they operate to a standard they don't do anywhere else in the world and have caused a chronic environmental catastrophe there. And they've now recently tried to leave Nigeria without doing a proper cleanup. So my regard for them is relatively low. In my experience, they will not clean up unless they're compelled to. And one of the mechanisms to do that is through litigation. So we are trying to do that and then establish a precedent that others can build on. But yeah, I think asking nicely, in my experience, hasn't worked.
Start with letter before action. So Flaviano and Annika, what's needed in your perspectives to really replicate and scale this work? What type of support?
Well, I suppose I'd have three things. Number one, I think we need to press more on getting the data from the companies. So pressing that environmental and social impact assessments are published, pressing that their environmental data is published, and if they're unwilling to do it, taking legal action to press them to do so. And that will depend on the jurisdictions. But the right to that data, we have got to be pressing on that button in Global South communities in particular. Secondly, we need more science. So I think what we've done in the copper cobalt belt, it's been done at 8 sites. Frankly, it could be done at 80 sites. That work needs scaling, and we need to do it both by supporting Congolese scientists and people like Flaviano and others who are doing that robust, independent science. And then thirdly, we got to just scale up on the accountability side. We've got to be pressing these companies domestically in the countries where they're operating, especially if they're countries where their own jurisdictions make that more difficult. And in particular here, I'm thinking of Chinese companies, where it's tough in home jurisdiction in China to press for accountability. So I think there are options domestically within Africa and elsewhere, but dual tracking that with pressure in home states, whether that's the UK, where amazing precedents are being set, but also Canada, Australia, places we know where large multinationals are hosted. But I think all three of those different avenues are absolutely needed. And I agree with Matt, having been in the room with many of these companies, it's important we do that advocacy, absolutely, but we need to press them on the hard edge, which is in court or through complaints mechanisms.
I just wanted to add a couple of more things that we need. Matt mentioned the fact that they had this previous data, so the baseline, and that's super important. That's the most difficult part. You were really lucky. I mean, I have done like 50 cases in my life or more, and I only had that luck once. Most of the time you arrive and you don't have nothing. You arrive when the damage is already done and you don't have baseline data, and that's super complicated. It's not impossible, but it's complicated because then you have to take points that are upstream, and then you have to do specification to, identify the source of pollution, because identify the pollution is relatively simple. What is more complicated is identify where this pollution comes from and then what this pollution do to people. And then I think it also had to change a bit the paradigm and the mentality of foundations and aid, because they, so far in my experience, they always seen the scientific part like something that is relegated to the university and to the the higher room of science, and not to civil society and to local communities, citizen science. And that has to change, because that is what gives you the possibility to have the baseline data and the data, which is the scientific evidence, is the cornerstone for environmental litigation. I will sign it and write it everywhere since now on. But obviously you need to have funds for that. Scientific investigation is expensive. I mean, it's cheaper than you might think, but they still have a cost,